The rejection. The morning light streamed through the windows of Rosewood Restaurant, catching on the copper pots hanging above the pristine kitchen island. Vivian Nguyen carefully piped a delicate swirl of buttercream onto a row of petit fours, her steady hands betraying none of the turmoil that had kept her awake most of the night. "Those look amazing, Viv," said Jasmine, the sous chef, pausing to admire Vivian's work. "Thanks," Vivian murmured, tucking a stray strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Just trying something new with the lavender extract." What she didn't say was how desperately she needed this distraction, how the precise measurements and familiar motions of baking were the only things keeping her grounded as her personal life threatened to unravel completely. She'd taken 3 pregnancy tests over the past week, all positive. The reality was still sinking in, along with the knowledge that she needed to tell Dominic today. The thought made her stomach clench with anxiety. Dominic Westbrook. Even his name conjured a complicated mix of emotions. Their relationship had been brief but intense. 3 months of dinners at exclusive restaurants, weekend trips to the coast, and nights that made her believe, foolishly perhaps, that there was something real between them. Until he'd begun to pull away, canceling plans and answering her messages with increasing brevity. She hadn't seen him in nearly 5 weeks. Their last conversation had been stilted and awkward, ending without any clear resolution. And now, this. At precisely 5:30 p.m., Vivian stood outside the sleek glass building that housed Westbrook Architectural Design. Her reflection wavered in the polished surface, a petite woman in a simple blue dress, her usually confident posture now hunched slightly as if bracing for impact. The receptionist recognized her from previous visits and waved her through with a smile. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt interminable. Dominic's office occupied the corner of the building, offering panoramic views of Portland and the distant mountains. He was on the phone when she arrived, his tall frame silhouetted against the early evening sky. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his tailored suit impeccable. Everything about him spoke of precision and control. He looked up, surprise flickering across his features before settling into a neutral expression. He murmured something into the phone and hung up. "Vivian," he said, not rising from his chair. "This is unexpected. I need to talk to you," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's important." He gestured to the chair across from his desk, glancing at his watch. "I have a dinner meeting in 40 minutes. Vivian remained standing. "This won't take long." The carefully prepared speech she'd rehearsed dozens of times evaporated, leaving her with nothing but the bare truth. "I'm pregnant, Dominic. 8 weeks. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. She watched as his expression shifted. Surprise, then calculation, then something harder settling into place. "And you're certain it's mine?" His voice was cool, detached. The question stung more than she had anticipated. "Yes," she said. "There hasn't been anyone else." Dominic leaned back in his chair, regarding her with eyes that revealed nothing. "That's unfortunate timing for you," he said. "But I'm afraid it's not mine." The words hit her with physical force. "What do you mean it's not yours?" "Of course, it is." "It's not mine," he repeated, his tone flat and final. "We were careful, Vivian." "Not always," she countered, heat rising to her cheeks. "And nothing is 100% enough." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket in one smooth motion. "I think you should go. I have a meeting to prepare for." "That's it?" Her voice cracked. "You're just going to deny this? Deny your own child?" "There is no child of mine," Dominic said, walking around the desk to open his office door. "I'm sorry. If you're in a difficult situation but I can't help you with something that isn't my responsibility." Vivian stood frozen, unable to comprehend how quickly the ground had vanished beneath her feet. She had expected shock, perhaps anger or disbelief, but not this cold, immediate rejection. Not this complete dismissal. "Look at me," she demanded, taking a step toward him. "Look me in the eyes and tell me you really believe that." For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Doubt, perhaps, or guilt, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. His amber eyes, the same ones that had once looked at her with warmth and desire, now regarded her with detached indifference. "Goodbye, Vivian," he said quietly. She walked past him on unsteady legs, the humiliation burning through her chest. The office door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded like finality. The journey home passed in a blur. Vivian barely registered the bus ride, the walk to her apartment, the mechanical act of unlocking her door. It wasn't until she was standing in her small kitchen, staring at the collection of cheerful magnets on her refrigerator, that the tears finally came. She sank to the floor, back pressed against the cabinets, and allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. Alone. Pregnant. Rejected so completely that the memory of it felt like a physical wound. When the tears subsided, she made herself a cup of ginger tea and sat at her tiny kitchen table, watching as dusk settled over the city. The panic and despair began to give way to something else, a quiet, steely resolve. She placed a hand over her still flat stomach. "It's just us now," she whispered. "But we're going to be okay." The next morning, Vivian called in sick to work, for the first time in 3 years. She spent the day researching prenatal care options, calculating budgets, and making lists. By evening, she had a plan. Not a perfect one, but a beginning. The following weeks unfolded in a pattern of nausea, exhaustion, and determined forward momentum. She told her boss about the pregnancy, renegotiated her hours to accommodate future, doctor appointments, and began setting aside what little money she could spare. Some days, the magnitude of what she was facing threatened to overwhelm her, but more often, she found herself thinking about the child growing inside her with a fierce, protective love that surprised her with its intensity. "We don't need him," she would tell herself on the hardest days. We never did. At 12 weeks, she saw her baby on an ultrasound for the first time, a tiny, flickering heartbeat that made her own heart expand with wonder. The technician smiled at her tear-streaked face. "Strong heartbeat," she said kindly. "You've got a fighter in there." Vivian thought about Dominic that day, wondering if he ever thought about her, if he ever questioned his certainty. She imagined, telling him about the ultrasound, showing him the grainy black-and-white image she now carried in her wallet. But the fantasy always ended the same way, with the memory of his cold dismissal, the finality in his voice when he said, "It's not mine." By the time her second trimester began, Vivian had settled into a routine. Work, doctor appointments, prenatal yoga classes at the community center. She had told her small circle of friends about the pregnancy, offering a simplified version of events that omitted the most painful details. Jasmine from work had been particularly supportive, accompanying Vivian to appointments and helping her prepare the small second bedroom of her apartment for the baby's arrival. Together they painted, the walls a soft sage green, and assembled a second-hand crib. "You're going to be an amazing mom," Jasmine told her one evening as they sorted through tiny clothes donated by another friend. "This kid is lucky to have you." Vivian smiled, folding a minuscule sweater. "I just hope I'm enough," she admitted. "Doing this alone. It's not what I imagined." "You're not alone," Jasmine said firmly. "You have me, you have all of us, and you're stronger than you think." At 20 weeks, Vivian learned she was having a girl. The knowledge made everything more real, more specific. Not just a baby, but a daughter. She began to imagine a little girl with her dark hair and perhaps though she tried not to dwell on it, Dominic's amber eyes. She chose the name Willow, strong yet flexible, able to bend without breaking. It felt right, a wish as much as a name. As her body changed and her daughter grew, Vivian found herself changing too. The hurt of Dominic's rejection didn't disappear, but it receded, becoming just one part of a larger story, her story, and now Willow's. A story that would continue long after that painful day in his office. In the quiet evenings, with her hands resting on her growing belly, feeling the flutter of her daughter's movements, Vivian would sometimes whisper promises to her unborn child. "I'll always be here for you," she would say. "I'll never turn you away. And no matter what happens, you will always, always be loved." The encounter. 4 years had passed since that devastating day in Dominic's office. 4 years of sleepless nights, hard work, early mornings, and a love so profound it sometimes took Vivian's breath away. Willow Nguyen was now a spirited 4-year-old, with curly dark hair, an infectious giggle, and amber eyes that sometimes made Vivian's heart clench with the memory they carried. Despite everything, she had never been able to regret a single moment that had led to her daughter. "Mommy, look! I made it dance!" Willow exclaimed, holding up a pinwheel that spun in the gentle spring breeze. They were at the annual Portland Cherry Blossom Festival, pink petals drifting around them like snow. "That's beautiful, sweetie," Vivian said, adjusting her daughter's jacket. "Do you want to see the kite display next?" Willow nodded enthusiastically, already skipping ahead down the path. Vivian smiled, watching her daughter's boundless energy with a mixture of love and exhaustion. The past 4 years hadn't been easy, but they had been full. After Willow's birth, Vivian had continued working at Rosewood Restaurant, juggling childcare with the help of friends and a daycare center that offered sliding-scale fees. When Willow turned 2, Vivian had taken the biggest risk of her life, opening her own bakery with her small savings and a loan from her parents in California. Sweet Pea. Bakery was tiny, just a counter and a few tables in a renovated space on a side street, but it was hers. The early mornings allowed her to be done by mid-afternoon, giving her precious hours with Willow. The business was slowly growing, building a loyal clientele drawn to her inventive pastries and warm hospitality. Today was rare, a Saturday when the bakery was closed for the holiday weekend. A day to simply be Willow's mom, without the constant mental calculations of inventory and schedules that usually ran in the background of her mind. "Can we get cotton candy?" Willow asked, pointing to a vendor's cart swathed in pink and blue, clouds of spun sugar. "After lunch," Vivian promised. "Let's find something more substantial first." They wandered through the festival, stopping to admire artisan crafts and watch street performers. Willow charmed everyone she met, chatting easily, with strangers in the uninhibited way of young children. Vivian had long since grown accustomed to the comments. How precocious she was, how she had her mother's smile, but those unusual amber eyes must come from her father. They were sharing a plate of noodles at a picnic table when Vivian felt it, the distinct sensation of being watched. She glanced up and her heart stuttered in her chest. Standing less than 20 feet away, partially obscured by a cherry tree in full bloom, was Dominic Westbrook. He was looking directly at them, his expression one of stunned recognition. He appeared much the same, tall and imposing in expensive casual wear, his dark hair now with the barest touches of silver at the temples. But there was something different about his face, a less guarded quality that she had never seen before. Vivian's first instinct was to gather Willow and flee. Her arms actually moved toward her daughter before she forced herself to remain calm. She would not disrupt her child's day because of him. She would not give him that power. Instead, she deliberately looked away, focusing on Willow, who was attempting to capture a noodle with her plastic fork, her small brow furrowed in concentration. "Here, let me help," Vivian said, her voice remarkably steady as she twisted the noodles around Willow's fork. I can do it myself, Willow insisted, with the fierce independence that both delighted and challenged Vivian daily. Of course you can, sweet pea, Vivian said, adding gently, but sometimes it's okay to accept help too. From the corner of her eye, she saw Dominic move, taking a hesitant step in their direction before stopping, seemingly frozen in indecision. A part of her, the part that still carried the scar of his rejection, hoped he would walk away. But another part, one she didn't want to acknowledge, held its breath. Willow chose that moment to drop her fork, which clattered to the ground. Oops, she giggled. It's okay, Vivian said, reaching into her bag for wet wipes to clean it off. Accidents happen. When she looked up again, Dominic was gone. Relief and an unexpected pang of disappointment mingled uncomfortably in her chest. She scanned the crowd but couldn't spot him. All done, Willow announced, pushing away her plate. Cotton candy now? Vivian managed a smile. Sure, sweetie. Let's go find some. They continued through the festival, but Vivian's carefree mood had evaporated. She found herself constantly searching faces in the crowd, both dreading and anticipating another glimpse of Dominic. They were watching a traditional dance performance when Vivian felt someone approach from behind. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. Some primitive part of her sensed his presence, a remnant from a time she preferred not to remember. Vivian. Dominic's voice was quiet, tentative in a way she had never heard before. She turned slowly, positioning herself slightly in front of Willow. Dominic, she acknowledged, her tone neutral. His eyes moved from her face to Willow, who was still engrossed in the dancers, then back to Vivian. The question in them was unmistakable. This isn't the time or place, Vivian said firmly but quietly. I understand, he replied, his voice strained. But may I speak with you? Not now, but soon. Before she could answer, Willow tugged at her sleeve. Mommy, who's that man? Dominic's eyes widened as they fixed on Willow's face, taking in her features with an intensity that made Vivian instinctively tighten her hold on her daughter's hand. This is Mr. Westbrook, Vivian said carefully. He's an acquaintance of mine. Hello, Willow said, suddenly shy but polite. Hello, Dominic replied, his voice hardly more than a whisper. He cleared his throat. You have a beautiful daughter. The simplicity of the statement, the naked emotion behind it, caught Vivian off guard. For a brief moment, she glimpsed what this encounter must be like for him. The shock, the dawning realization, the undeniable evidence of his amber eyes reflected back at him. Thank you, she said, finding her voice. We need to be going now. Please, Dominic said quickly as she turned to leave. Just a conversation. That's all I'm asking. Vivian hesitated, torn between protective instinct and the knowledge that this day had been inevitable from the moment she first saw those 2 lines on the pregnancy test 4 years ago. The bakery, she said finally. Sweet Pea on Alder Street. Monday morning, 8 o'clock after the breakfast rush. Relief washed over his face. Thank you. I'll be there. As they walked away, Willow looked up at her mother with curious eyes. Is he your friend? Vivian struggled to find the right words. We knew each other a long time ago. Before I was born. Yes, Vivian said softly. Before you were born. The remainder of the weekend passed in a state of tense anticipation. Vivian moved through her usual routines, grocery shopping, laundry, preparing for the week ahead, while her mind constantly circled back to the impending conversation with Dominic. What did he want? What could he possibly say now that would matter? And what would she tell Willow, who had never asked about her father but someday would? Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. Vivian dropped Willow at preschool with extra hugs, then opened the bakery at 6 as usual. Her assistant, Trevor, arrived shortly after, and together they prepared for the morning customers. By 8, the early rush had subsided. Vivian sent Trevor on his break and was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed. Dominic stepped into the warm, fragrant space, looking slightly out of place among the homey decor and handwritten chalkboard menus. He was dressed more casually than she was used to seeing him, dark jeans and a gray sweater, but still exuded the quiet confidence that had once attracted her to him. "Good morning," he said, approaching the counter. "Good morning," she replied, setting aside her cloth. "There's a table in the corner that's more private." He nodded and followed her to a small table partially screened by a decorative shelf of potted herbs. They sat facing each other, an uncomfortable silence settling between them. "Your bakery is lovely," he said finally. "Very you." "Thank you," she said, wondering if he even remembered enough about her to make such an assessment. He seemed to gather his thoughts, fingers tapping lightly on the tabletop. "I think we both know why I'm here," he said at last. "Your daughter." "Willow," Vivian supplied. "Willow," he repeated, the name unfamiliar on his tongue. "She's mine, isn't she?" There it was, the question that had hung between them 4 years. Ego, now asked with none of the dismissive certainty he had shown then. "Yes," Vivian said simply. "She is." Dominic exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding his breath. "I knew it the moment I saw her. Those eyes—" "Your eyes," Vivian agreed, softly. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, then immediately held up a hand. "That was a stupid question. Of course you told me, and You said she wasn't yours," Vivian finished for him. "You said it wasn't your responsibility." The words hung in the air between them, heavy, with the weight of 4 years' absence. "I was wrong," Dominic said, his voice low and strained. So terribly wrong. Vivian studied him, searching for signs of the cold, dismissive man who had sent her away that day. Instead, she saw someone haunted, the confident facade cracked to reveal something raw underneath. "What do you want, Dominic?" she asked directly. "I'd like to know her," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "I'd like to be part of her life, if that's possible." "And if I say no?" Vivian challenged, protective instinct flaring. "What then? Will you take me to court? Try to use your money and influence to force your way into our lives?" "No," he said, the response immediate and firm. "I wouldn't do that. I have no right to demand anything. I know that." His sincerity surprised her. She had expected demands, perhaps legal threats, not this humility. "Why now?" she pressed. "What's changed?" Dominic was quiet for a moment, as if considering how much to reveal. "Everything," he said finally. "Seeing her, seeing you both. It was like waking up. These past 4 years I've been—" He trailed off, searching for words. "I've been successful by most metrics. The firm has grown. I've won awards, landed, major contracts. But there's been this emptiness I couldn't name until Saturday when I saw her smile." Vivian felt her carefully constructed defenses wavering. She had spent 4 years building a life without him, telling herself they were better off, that his absence was a wound that had healed. Now she wasn't so sure. "She doesn't know about you," Vivian said. "She hasn't asked yet, but she will soon." "What will you tell her?" "The truth," Vivian said. "Or at least a version she can understand at her age." Dominic nodded slowly. "I'd like the chance to show her, and you, that I'm not the same man who turned you away. I know I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can be better going forward." The bell above the door chimed as new customers entered. Vivian glanced at her watch. Her break was nearly over. "I need time to think about this," she said. "This isn't just about you and me. Willow comes first, and I won't disrupt her life or confuse her. I understand, Dominic said, rising from his chair. Thank you for hearing me out. For what it's worth, you've done an amazing job with her. She's incredible. The genuine admiration in his voice caught Vivian off guard. She is, she agreed softly. Here's my card, he said, placing it on the table. My personal number is on the back. Call me when you're ready to talk again. On your terms, whenever that may be. As he turned to leave, Vivian found herself speaking. Dominic. He paused, looking back at her. She likes butterflies and anything purple. She can count to 20 in English and 10 in Vietnamese. She's allergic to strawberries. A small, sad smile touched his lips. Thank you for telling me that. After he left, Vivian remained seated for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. The Dominic she had just spoken with seemed worlds away from the man who had coldly dismissed her 4 years ago. People changed, she certainly had. But could she trust this change? Could she risk her daughter's heart on the hope that his remorse was genuine? She didn't have answers yet, but for the first time in 4 years, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that Willow might someday know her father. And that thought, frightening as it was, also carried with it a whisper of something like hope. The reconciliation. A month passed before Vivian called the number on Dominic's card. That brief conversation led to a carefully orchestrated meeting at a children's museum, neutral territory where Willow could play while the adults talked. Dominic was introduced simply as Mommy's friend who wanted to get to know her. "Watch me climb," Willow called out, scaling the foam structure with confident agility. "She's fearless," Dominic murmured, his expression a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Always has been," Vivian replied, "even as a baby." The awkwardness between them was palpable, but Willow's presence provided a buffer, her enthusiasm drawing them both into her orbit. Over the following weeks, these meetings became more regular. Dominic proved surprisingly patient, never pushing for more than Vivian was willing to give, content to follow her lead in building this tentative relationship. "Why are you really doing this?" Vivian asked him one evening as they watched Willow feeding ducks at a park pond. "Is it guilt? Obligation?" Dominic considered the question carefully. "At first, maybe," he admitted. "But now, I just want to know her. I want the chance to be her father, if she'll have me." "And what happens when you get bored or when it gets difficult?" Vivian challenged. "Children aren't architectural projects you can walk away from when they don't go according to plan." "I know I have no right to ask you to trust me," he said quietly, "but I'm asking anyway. I've spent 4 years building empty successes. I don't want to miss another day of her life." Something in his voice, raw honesty, without the polished veneer she remembered, reached a part of Vivian that had been closed off for years. The conversation that changed everything happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in Vivian's small living room. Willow was napping, and the adults spoke in hushed tones about the future. "I think it's time," Vivian said, her decision made after weeks of careful observation. "She should know who you really are." Dominic's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "No," Vivian admitted with a small smile. "But she deserves the truth, and you've proven you're committed to being in her life consistently." When Willow woke, they sat her between them and, with simple words appropriate for a 4-year-old, explained that Dominic wasn't just Mommy's friend, he was her father. Willow's reaction was typically straightforward. "Like Penny's daddy?" she asked, referring to her best friend from preschool. "Yes, sweetheart," Vivian confirmed, "like Penny's daddy." Willow studied Dominic with new interest, noting with a child's perception, "That's why we have the same eyes." "Yes," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's why." The adjustment wasn't always smooth. There were questions Vivian, couldn't easily answer, moments of jealousy from both adults, and the inevitable complications of creating a new family structure from broken foundations. But there were also unexpected joys. The first time Willow ran to Dominic with outstretched arms, the afternoon he taught her to fold paper butterflies, the evening they all had dinner together and laughed until tears streamed down their faces. 6 months after that day at the Cherry Blossom Festival, they had established a rhythm that worked. Not perfect, but functional and increasingly comfortable. Dominic had proven his commitment not with grand gestures, but with consistent presence. Showing up for preschool pickup when Vivian had bakery emergencies, remembering which stuffed animal was Willow's current favorite, learning to navigate the complexities of co-parenting with patience and humility. "I never thought we'd be here," Vivian admitted one evening as they watched Willow splashing in the bathtub, her laughter echoing off the tiles. "Neither did I," Dominic replied, his eyes reflecting not just their daughter, but the journey that had brought them to this point. "Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for becoming someone worthy of it," Vivian answered softly. As they helped Willow into her pajamas, reading her favorite bedtime story together, they silently acknowledged the truth that had emerged from the shadows of past mistakes. Family wasn't defined by perfect beginnings, but by the choice to love each day, to forgive, to try again. Choices they were now making together, for the amber-eyed little girl who had changed everything.